Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this EPC policy briefing, which is looking at the outcome of Moldova's first round of the presidential election and the referendum on EU membership. Thank you very much for joining us. I think it was a very long and nail-biting 24 hours. I'm not a Moldovan, and it was even very nail-biting for myself. After what has been reported as unprecedented election interference by Russia, including vote buying. But as of today, the results that we have seen, or what I've seen so far, that Moldovans backed the EU accession by a very thin majority. But we're going to come back to that in a second for a thorough analysis. And furthermore, in the first round of the presidential vote, the current president, Maya Sandu, took, and I hope I've got the number right because I know they're changing, around 41.85% of the vote. And she was followed by the candidate of the Socialist Party, Alexander Stoyan Olu, 26.35%, so quite a big margin. And then a couple of others who received a much lower number. So there's many things to talk about, to analyze about the election and to look at what's going to happen next. And we have with us today two really good experts to discuss all these issues. First of all, coming live from Chisinau, Iulian Groza, who's the Executive Director of the Institute for European Policies and Reform. And from here in Brussels, actually the next building to the EPC almost, Ionela Maria Ciolan, who's a research officer at the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. Both have significant experience working on Moldova. Of course, as many of you know, Iulian has been in and out of the government as well. So I want to give first the floor to you, Iulian, to have your take on the outcome, and then come to you, Ionela.
Thank you very much, Amanda, and thanks for the EPC for organizing this very fresh discussion about the outcome of the elections and the referendum in Moldova. And of course, I'm very happy to be on a panel with Ionela, very good friend of ours. Yes, these elections have been very crucial for us, and I was trying to indicate in my series of op-eds I published in the last weeks. It was indeed about a turning point. It was the moment of we have been at the crossroads between further securing our path towards the European Union or staying still at the best, if not going back to Russia's influence. The stakes have been very high. We know very well already from many reports, not only of national authorities in the last weeks, but also investigative journalists that have done their own job, very courageous enough to show how the entire scheme of fraudulent activities conducted by Russia through their proxies have been taking place. We also have seen a series of reports and statements coming from various officials across the world, in EU, over Atlantic. We also have seen the big tech companies becoming more and more open, cooperative in the effort to prevent the dissemination of further disinformation activities. We also have seen Telegram becoming also cooperative. That maybe have been possible also due to the fact that the founder of Telegram has took action to become more cooperative with reports coming from various states, including ours. It was instrumental because, and it is still instrumental, we of course have not yet seen the whole amplitude of the intervention, but we have seen how Telegram chatbots have been used to recruit Moldovan citizens to be bribed through Russian banks through sophisticated schemes. Very interesting enough that according to the reports from the investigative journalists, but also from the police and security services, this vote bribing was very smart in a sense that they actually issued credit cards to all of the persons who got personal data without seeing them. Then these Russian banks have issued credit cards, not debit cards, but credit cards with funds which have been actually accepted as credits without knowing that. So it's very sophisticated. And if you look into the more legal legal aspects of it, then you would also have to, see how sophisticated it is from the legislation, traditional legislation of vote buying and bribing electorals, voters, because it was criminalized in Moldova. But a credit is a credit. It's very difficult to say it was given by one candidate or another one, even though he's not participating in the elections, but conducting illegal campaigning for the referendum, for a no campaign, and so on and so forth. So a lot of reports we have seen before the elections, we already knew that it would be very difficult. I think before the elections, my main concern was the fact that even though we will have the referendum with a positive result, the biggest challenge would have been the fact that the referendum will not be validated, because a part of the no campaign, which was sponsored illegally by Russia through Shore, and we know now that we talk about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, euros, that have been used to conduct this bribing with unprecedented amounts of funds, unprecedented scale. We know that besides this no types of campaign, which was done illegally by the Shore group and affiliates, you had a strong boycott campaign. Boycott campaign promoted by majority opposition parties like Socialist Party. So it was a split of roles here, and the strategy of Russia just. And the strategy of Russia was twofold: to get a strong no vote, which will be very much sourced by illegal funding. And we know, at least before the elections, that we heard from the police and security services figures of 130,000 citizens being part of this scheme. Millions, 15 millions of dollars, euros have been used to bribe them only in matter of 1 month. Mr. Shore came up in his traditional kind of Skype Zoom type of intervention, saying that, well, the amounts are much higher, so it's not about 15, maybe it's actually 150 million, so being very cynical and provocative about it. So he had a very much strong campaign, and the second strategy was to boycott. So my concern before the elections, and that was a concern which was shared by many colleagues from media, from civil society, from think tanks, and policymakers and journalists that have been, very presently in Moldova for the last weeks and, promoting the events in Moldova, was about the threshold. Because for the constitutional referendum, you need a threshold of 1/3 of the voters from the voters' lists, and having also a strong boycott campaign from the majority competitors, especially when you look at the candidates. You had 11 candidates for the presidential elections, and the majority of them did not have a campaign or ignored the referendum at all. So only 2 candidates had a yes vote option in campaigning. The rest 9, many of them independents, many of them now we realized in the investigative journalists articles, very much proxies of Shore or other oligarchs who are fugitive. So they have been very much campaigning, or not campaigning, but ignoring the referendum. And of course, the main opposition party, the Socialist Party, led by the former president Dodon, now with his candidate, Mr. Stoyanoglu, former prosecutor general from Gagauzia, basically also ignoring the referendum. So my concern was actually the threshold, and I was very happy to see at 4 o'clock yesterday that we reached the threshold, and people were very positive in general. But we were not aware of the scale of the no campaign. Now we know that we had seen basically over 700,000 of Moldovans voting no. The reasons behind they can be diverse, of course. We heard yesterday the president, the incumbent president, talking about 300,000 of potential vote frauds, which roughly it means about 12% of the vote, which is significant, especially when you look at the margin of the results, not only of the referendum, but also on the presidential elections. You mentioned rightly, for the presidential elections, the incumbent President Sandu got around 42%. The next candidate, Stonoglu, about 26%, and the third in the row, Mr. Usate, about 10%. So, of course, this is very much significant, but just to say that at the end of the day, I was quite happy to see the result. Despite these two strategies, I think the fact that we also had a very active Stratcom campaigning in Moldova, not done by the government alone. We, as a civil society organizations, media organizations in Moldova, many private independent medias, they had their own campaigns, unpaid, so basically non-paid campaigns. We really felt how the elements, the approach of a whole of a society works in terms of countering disinformation and Stratcom. We had civil society initiatives like Citizens for Europe, an initiative that managed to mobilize about 700 volunteers. I mean, singers, journalists, civil society experts, various notorious people in the country, basically over the 4 months, going door to door, organizing events outside Chișinău, various reasons. So we had a really, really, really strong campaign. So with all that, I think the good news is that we managed to protect our results, even though on the edge. But the good news is that we managed to defeat Russia at least in one strategy, the boycott, and that is crucial. And more importantly, I think at the end of the day, a victory is a victory, and democracy is democracy. This is how it works. The added value legitimacy of the result is that we have over 50% participation rate. So my estimations before the elections was that if we get about 40, 45, we will be lucky. But we had over 50% participation, which adds on the legitimacy of the result, where you have a majority, 50.4% in favor and 49.6% against. A win at the edge, but a win at the edge that worked in our case in a positive way, and not as good as in the case of Brexit, where you also had a win at the edge, but in a negative way. So we all know the outcome of that, and I think despite the challenges we have seen, despite the efforts that Moldova society, authorities, our partners will have to engage further, because Russia did not stop and will not stop to conduct its interference and undermining our democracy and the choice of the people. Despite that, I think we are stronger, still vulnerable. But also, I think the Moldovan case provides the whole of Europe and the world with a lot of lessons learned. Unfortunately, we had to be kind of a lab for the effort of testing what Stratcom means, what resilience building means, how it works. We were joking, well, in a way joking, that still in countries where you have vulnerable population, where a country that is still exposed to disinformation, maybe a 50 euro bribe to an old lady worth much more than billions of euros of investments to ensure, long-term attractiveness. More importantly, I have to tell you that the approach and the Russia strategy through SURE is so sophisticated that basically what we observed in the result of the no, they targeted essentially pro-European regions in the country, like, for example, Ungheni or Cahul. These are cities and raions that have benefited for the last years of enhanced EU support for development, for infrastructure, for different projects, and so on and so forth. And these are two kind of pilot programs that the EU is conducting in Moldova to support, rural, local, regional development. And it's interesting that in these cities, I mean, in these raions, because cities were positive, but the villages around the main city, in a way, at the end of the day, brought a negative result. So you had about 37% no, 37% yes, a majority no. So basically, this is a pattern that we have seen, just like in case of Gagauzia, that has benefited for years from enhanced contribution and support of investment. The same where you had this narrative like they're not thankful for the support they get. The people in those regions, they do not appreciate that. The same strategy Russia's trying to implement in other regions, pro-European regions, with the intent to create a divided debate, confrontation, and an internal narrative that would deepen the confrontation. So I would just conclude that I think the challenges are extraordinary that we face. Moldova is a terrain for hybrid warfare and testing of Russia. I think we all have to work much more to increase our resilience. I think we all, with our international partners and community, have to think and act more efficiently in increasing our resilience and confronting Russia hybrid warfare. We also need to be more sophisticated. We also need to be smarter. We also need to be more, united in our efforts so that we can resist further. But the good news, yes, I have to tell you that today I'm very happy. This morning I was very happy that we got this result at the end of the day for the referendum. Now we will see the validation of it. We still need to see the Constitutional Court validating it. And as the moment as the Constitutional Court will validate, it will be part of our constitution, as that's how the law works and how democracy works. Then we'll have to see the presidential elections. The second round is scheduled for 3rd of November, and that's something that will follow. But just one remark here. I think the second round of elections will be definitely geopolitical. And we will have a geopolitical vote and maybe kind of a second round of a referendum, an opportunity for Moldovans to confirm or reconfirm or improve or vice versa their vote about European accession to the EU and send a clear signal to all of the world. So second round of presidential elections will be really a continuation of the Sunday's referendum, and it will be very much about, again, a turning point, and very important because it's also about the next electoral cycle, parliamentary elections, which will follow next year. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Iulian, for these really excellent insights into how you see what has happened, and for raising many important issues that I think we're going to get back to in the second round. I want to give the floor now to Ionela for her insights. Perhaps you can also comment, Ionela, on the role that the diaspora actually played in this vote, because from what I've read, they seem to have played actually a crucial role in the actual final outcome. Just to the audience, you can put your questions either by raising your hand. I already see we have one hand raised, but also by typing them into the box below, into the Q&A box, and I'll put the questions as soon as we finish these first couple of expos. So the floor is to you, Ionela.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with the EPC, and it's great to be in the same panel with Iulian, and also a very hard challenge to speak after Iulian, after he so smartly presented the whole, context of how the elections happened and the repercussions of it. But I would also want to focus on the fact that a victory, it's a victory, because now I'm in Bucharest and I'm reading and seeing all the comments from the other side here, and a lot of people are very concerned with the results. I believe that we should be happy because Republic of Moldova is fighting a hybrid war, which was started by Kremlin at the same time when they started the conventional war against Ukraine. And in the past 2 years, Chisinau, actually, they had a lot of issues. Apart from an energy crisis, they had a lot of threats to their own security. They have an attempt, national coup. They had a lot of infiltrations. Now we had this vote fraud and vote buying. We have this very clear Russian influence in changing the perceptions about what the European Union means. And even before of the elections, there was a campaign which was started this spring that the European Union accession was started to be promoted as similar with the NATO accession in order to create this fear in the mind of regular citizens, regular Moldovians, that if Moldovians will join the European Union, basically they will renounce their neutrality, which is part of the constitution. So that's why somehow in this very complicated context, we can understand why 40% of Moldovians nowadays, they have this fear of the European Union. And in this regard, I believe that the European Union can do more in strategically communicating what the European Union stands for, what are their values, what does it mean to be a member of the European Union. Also, countries who are new part of the European Union, they can, I know, help the authorities in Chisinau with the know-how on how to deal with these segments of the populations who are more, fearful of the European Union as an institution. And then I also believe that we have to highlight better the economical, the political, and the social benefits of joining the European Union. And now, since Republic of Moldova started the accession negotiation process, it will have access to these pre-accession funds, which probably will also, in the near future, will change the mentality of some of the Moldovians about what the European Union stands for and what its process doing in Moldova to help the regular citizens. And probably here, I believe that the first move that Brussels should do in the following days, they should approve this 1.8 billion growth plan for Moldova, which was recently, last week, if I'm not mistaken, announced by the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. So we need to show that Brussels is standing by Moldova in this critical hour, because we are seeing that we have a fight in Moldova. We have not the classical conventional fight as we have in Ukraine, where basically they are fighting on the battle grounds for each inch of territory. We have a fight for each mind of Moldovan citizen. And I believe that we have to do more and double down our efforts in increase the resilience of the society and also the information about what is the European Union and why joining the European Union it's a great, will bring great contributions to the development of the Moldovan society, because for the majority of the Moldovan people, the improvement of their economic lifestyle, and fight against corruption, they are the main two concerns, more than the geopolitical discussions about turning right or left. And here on the diaspora vote, so we had a huge number of Moldovians voting in diaspora, not so many as in the presidential elections 4 years ago. So that's something that we'll have to see more into, why not so many Moldovians residing in diaspora went to vote. The voting was, nevertheless, their numbers was quite high, and they were the ones who basically turned the percentage in the referendum, especially in the referendum, because last night at around 2 a.m. when I closed my internet, I went to sleep. We had around 45% of Moldovians voting yes in the referendum and 54 voting no. And this morning we already started to see the opposite mirrors. So basically we saw an increase of the people and voting for the inclusion of Republic of Moldova and the European Union. And these are the people that basically are living in the European Union, and they are the ones who are experiencing every day what does it mean to live in the European Union and all the benefits that the Union brings to its citizens. And they are most of them, they are the ones also who basically are the stronger supporters of the European Union. We also saw in diaspora 20% of the people living in diaspora, they voted no for the referendum. I'm not sure exactly because I'm still waiting as myself as well to find the
77 pro,
okay,
and 22 against.
Okay, good. So some of them are the ones that are coming from Russia, and we saw that in Russia we had some incidents at the embassies, at the voting stations, that basically Moldovians across the countries were taken with buses and pushed forward to vote in the referendum. So we had an interference there. At the end of the time, at the same time, we also have some Moldovians in the European Union who basically voted against the referendum, and this is a very particular and strange case, but it's very common also with what's happening in Eastern Europe, the fact that we have people that don't understand very well some of the progressive rights of the European Union, and they internalize this pro-Russian propaganda, and sometimes they don't know how to discern about the fact that everyone had the rights to be part of the European Union, and not only some values are the right values. I will stop with that because there are other elements that I would also want to add, except of the diaspora. I also want to add the fact that this was a very important test of how the parliamentary elections and the parliamentary campaign will play out. Because we have to look at the global picture. The turning of the Republic of Moldova now, because since we are in this crossroad, will matter a lot on the future parliamentary elections, because Republic of Moldova, it's a parliamentary republic. So basically the parliament and the government will be the ones who will decide the key strategies and priorities of the future government. And in this regard, the European Union in the upcoming months, because the upcoming parliamentary election, they have to be held until July 2025, if I'm not mistaken. So the upcoming months will be very critical, and probably we'll see a lot of interference, disinformation. So the Russians and the SOR people and the pro-Russians in Republic of Moldova, they will continue with the same high intensity of spreading fake information, of trying to polarize the society, because their main goal is making sure that pro-Russians will win the majority of the votes in the parliamentary elections in order to change the course of the country. We hope that Maia Sandu will win the presidential elections. She will have a very tough second round, as Iulian also mentioned. Will be very critical for the Western partners, the European Union, to help her in this process, but also we'll have to support the democratic electoral process of Republic of Moldova ahead of the parliamentary elections. And here I believe that also the European Union has to put its house in order, because we have these problems even within our union when we were speaking about the Russian foreign interference and all this disinformation campaigns. So probably what we need, we need that the European Union very comprehensive strategy on how to fight this disinformation, because the current toolkit that we have is not functioning. So we need more actions of how to sanction all this illegal vote buying activities. And also we need to be better at increasing the resilience of our societies and also helping our candidate countries in these processes.
Thank you very much, Ionela. You raised a lot of important points there, including what you were just saying about strengthening our toolbox against hybrid threats, including disinformation and vote buying, as well as strengthening resilience. But I want to come back to you now, Iulian, to return to the issue of the second round of the presidential vote. I mean, to what extent do you expect to see a real doubling down of Russian efforts? I mean, how far can they actually go to derail the process? And secondly, maybe you can tell us a bit more about the other candidate, because maybe not everybody in this audience here is 100% clued up with who he is. I mean, with Alexander Stoyanoglu. I mean, who is he, and who will be voting for him? Why will they vote for him? Is it all, you know, sort of Russian vote buying or whatnot? But he must have a legitimate vote base as well. I mean, how much of a threat is he to Maia Sandu?
Well, first of all, just a quick remark about diaspora and about the turnout. In fact, the turnout of diaspora was very good. It was one of the highest turnouts for diaspora in elections. It was higher than 2021 parliamentary elections, and it was higher than the first round of presidential elections in 2020. We didn't get about 20,000 to get to the record numbers of 2020 second round of elections. So we had a very high participation in that. That's number one. Number two, we have indeed about 75% support for EU and about 23% against EU. The figure is more or less similar to the year of 2020, 2021, with the difference that we still have some variation. Maybe it could be a decrease, and that decrease could be explained by the migration of Moldovan migrants from Russia to EU. Many of them after the Crimea War in 2014, but of course after the invasion of and the war of Russia now in Ukraine, they just moved, came back to Moldova, moved to other places to take a job, and the number of migrants in Russia has decreased hugely in the last 10 years. Now it's about 75,000 compared to about 350, 400,000 in 2014. Just a remark. About the second round of elections, as I just hinted in my intro remarks, it will be really about now a geopolitical vote. It's clear that Maia Sandu is positioning herself as a pro-European president, and it will be about a continuation of her mandate and a continuation of their efforts in the second round to advance Moldova towards the national objective to be ready by 2030 to join the EU. So it will be very much about that. And of course, having a referendum, even on the edge, but having that result included in our constitution, that will provide additional guarantees, like a pillar for the next, political processes in the countries, including for the next parliamentary elections. So that will be very important, of course. It will be again a very hard race. It's clear that Maia Sandu managed to secure quite an important vote in the first round. We don't know. I mean, the impact of the vote buying of about 10%, maybe that had impacted also the results in the first rounds. We don't know that. It's just a speculation. But what is clear that she won the elections as an incumbent. I mean, she got the best result in the first round of elections as an incumbent. I think over 10%, much more than Dodon got in 2020 in the first rounds. She got at that time in the first round even more than Stoyanoglu got now in the second, being the second in the polls. So that surely indicates that Maya Sandu's popularity ahead of the second round is higher than Dodon's popularity ahead of the second round. And at the same time, again, Mr. Stoyanoglu has been projected like an independent candidate. He's from Gagauzia. He has been prosecutor general. He has been dismissed, and he has been under investigation, criminal investigations for corrupt allegations. All those now currently in the courts. There are some decisions of the European Court of Human Rights about the legality of his dismissal. But on top of it, there are continuous criminal investigations against some corruption allegations. Without finalization of the investigations, he still was been able to participate in these elections independent. He was one of the candidates that tried together to become an opposition candidate. It was not possible, and he was nominated by socialists, basically becoming the socialist candidate. Dodon did not compete for these elections, and basically their position was that they will support him. And very much the transfer of, Mr. Stoyanoglu was not in top, popularity in terms of notoriety, in terms of, presidential candidates. It's only after he was nominated as a socialist candidate. Of course, there was a transfer of image from Dodon and from socialist voters, and you have the result he received now about 26%, which roughly is the result of the Socialist Party in the opinion polls. Before the elections, he was credited with much less in the polls, around 10%, 12%. But that can be explained because at that time, maybe there was not enough time until the campaign, and then there was still a transfer of power because Dodon still had some rating, quite high rating. So you had a transfer of rating from Dodon and the rating he got in the meantime. So that's the reality what you have at the end of the day. Now, for the second round, of course, the agenda of Russia will be very much the whole testing and the whole mobilization, the whole scheme operated for the referendum. We expect it will be used for the presidential elections. And here it will depend very much on the authorities, how they will be agile and able to confront and to investigate and to limit and discourage application of these schemes in the second presidential round of presidential elections, number one. And number two, it will depend on the positioning of the other candidates who have competed and didn't got into the top two. It's very likely that many of the candidates, because some of them, clearly 3 of them have been reported to be proxies offshore, they very likely would support in campaign Mr. Stoyanoglu. There were other ambivalents also who would very likely be going to support Mr. Stoyanoglu, and there are maybe 1 or 2 candidates pro-European projected in the elections, although they didn't get even 1% in the elections. Maybe they will turn to the Maya Sandu. So it will not be a mathematical transfer of percentage. This is why I mentioned in the very beginning, it will be very much about the geopolitical choice of the presidential candidates. It will be very much about supporting pro-European candidate, which is Maya Sandu, and Mr. Stoyanoglu, who at least will be more ambivalent, if not pro-Russian, but will get the pro-Russian vote for sure. So then you'll see basically a repetition of this geopolitical vote in the presidential elections, and then we will see what will be the outcome. Again, with the It will also depend on the participation rate. Usually in the second round, the participation rate is higher, and as high as the participation rate, that favors more the pro-Europeans. Of course, diaspora participation is expected to be much higher. I mean, not much higher, but will be higher in the second round. And internally, I think there will be much higher mobilization, because the shock that many of the pro-Europeans, some of them who didn't vote, I think the shock of this referendum would wake more people, wake up more people, and yeah, we will see. We will see what will be the result. But of course, it will very much depend on the next 2 weeks of the campaign. It will depend if the candidates will have a debate. It's very likely that we will have a debate among them to see the differences, so that they have the opportunity, to better outline their differences and their agenda. It also depends a lot how the result of the referendum will be exploited. Unfortunately, it's very likely that the result of the referendum will be exploited by pro-Russians, also by other candidates. You already hear, these elements in. You also would see, and here I think is the effort of the Stratcom and countering narratives, Russian narratives. There is this narrative, and I saw from Dmitro one of the questions about this element of division. Dividing the society, confronting the society, trying to look for elements that would divide, and narratives would divide. It will not be about pro-Russians or minorities, because you have among pro-Russians, Russian speakers, you have also pro-Europeans. And the rather narrative would be somehow to create this confrontation, not between ethnic groups, but more a general kind of confrontation within the country, trying to exploit this, divided result. Even though in the edge positive, but still it shows kind of a division, and that will be the element that will be tried to be exploited. So to create, to incite, to escalate this division. And it'll be the task of the candidates to see how they can unify the vote, how they will unify around the vote. And I think this second round provides both an opportunity, but also a challenge. And it will very much depend on the strategies that the candidates would adopt. It's clear that the candidate that will manage to unite around itself, not only the pro-European result, but also the element of integrity, the element of image, the element of ability to strike coalition building in the country. I think that is the candidate that will win, and I think Sandu is still credited with the number 1 chance. And yeah, so we will see what will be the results of it in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, thank you, Iulian. I want to come back to you, Ionela, now, but I want to start with the questions, because we have quite a few in the chat box. So I'm going to come to you first, and actually you also just touched on this, Iulian. It's from Eric Morris, my colleague here, and it's about with the tight result of the referendum. Is the result likely to be contested, and what impact could this have on the second round? I mean, is that likely to have any second round impact?
This is a very good question, and probably we might see Russians and pro-Russian forces trying to contest the results, but at the same time we'll also have the West and the European Union will have to, and Moldovans will have to clearly communicate that this is the will of the people. And as Iulian also mentioned, the majority of the Moldovians went to vote in this referendum. So it's a legitimate referendum when we have, it's a narrow margin, but this is how democracy works. And I feel like this will be the key message that we'll have to communicate. It's a tight result, but in the end, it's a narrow margin for the yes group, that the majority of the Moldovians they want to be part of the European Union. It was a democratic process. And even in this very hard situation where we believe that around 30% of the vote was bought with sore money, it's still a success. Obviously, they will try to say that we are in that small fraction where, you know, it can be and they will try to contest the voting, but we have to prepare, and probably the authorities will have to prepare in communicating the fact that in the end this was the will of the people. Maybe Iulian wants to touch upon this as well, because he sees, you know, the situation more clearly from Chisinau, and he has a better feeling of if there will be a stronger contestation or not. But in my feeling, yes, we can expect everything from Russia, because we are in a we Moldovians, Republic of Moldova, it's in a hybrid war. It's trying to face a hybrid war for 2 years now, and this will continue in the upcoming months, and we might have even a higher intensity rate as we are moving towards the second round of elections for the presidential campaign, and then for the parliamentary elections.
Okay, thank you. Iulian, would you also like to comment on that? And I'm going to ask you to keep your answers quite short because we have a few questions.
No, I think I partially answered already.
Okay, but the second part of Eric's question, if can we expect? I mean, is this a sort of the Russian interference that we've seen? Is this a bad omen for the upcoming accession process? Is this something that we would also expect to see during this whole process? I mean, never-ending Russian interference, hybrid campaigns.
Well, Moldova has been a subject of hybrid warfare of Russia for many years. We have seen an intensity of unprecedented accounts in the last 2 years, in particular in last year. So Russia is waging a full war of aggression in Ukraine, and Russia is waging a full war of hybrid warfare in Moldova. So it's, for Russia, it's strategically important to weaken Moldova, to make it unstable, and to turn then Moldova against, to create instability in the region, and to turn Moldova against Ukraine and against the West. So the stakes are very high for them. So they would resort to all measures, vulnerabilities, and areas where we are not able to defend ourselves to reach their objective. So, and then, of course, you have several electoral cycles. I think this electoral cycle, we have, I mean, this test of elections, we passed it. I mean, we passed it despite all the efforts and illegal funds that Russia has been using, and not only funds, but also efforts to destabilize the country. So we passed it. We have another test to pass, the presidential elections, to make sure that the results of these elections, of course, are clear and create and give more power of legitimacy for the president, having a new constitution, I mean, revised constitution with a clear guarantee of European integration process, and use that to continue to make sure to defend Moldova's democracy and Moldova's European future for the next electoral cycle. And we will have definitely attempts of Russia to try to perpetuate the political crisis, to create a situation of perpetuation of political crisis, combining it with increased aggression against Ukraine, combining it with attempts to sabotage, gas supplies, electricity in the region in Moldova against ahead of the winter time, challenging basically all that things to create even more anxiety, to create more vulnerabilities, to then exploit it in the next parliamentary elections. So it's a combination of things. We got used to it. The good news of today is that we know our enemy. We know their tools. We know that we can confront them, maybe not totally, but we start to learn from it. We know that we're not alone in this. We are supported by our partners in the EU. And I think it's very important to secure this fragile result of the referendum. We managed to get as citizens of this country, despite the various types of hybrid warfare aggression. secure it and make sure that we advance. Otherwise, I think, yeah, next parliament will decide the next government, and we have quite an ambitious agenda. And we want to be ready by 2030 to join the EU, and which means we want to enter into the mandate of this European Commission to advance hugely in the negotiations, if not finalizing them by 2028, 2029, to reach these objectives. So we have all the ingredients there. We just need to make sure that we make full use of those which would help us to secure the future. And yeah, and then once again, I think the situation in which we are provides a lot of lessons learned and opportunities for the EU to see how to deal with hybrid warfare, aggression, and disinformation and other types of illegal schemes that Russia is waging across Europe. We may not know all the schemes that Russia is using in interfering in various European elections in various countries. Not to talk about US at this stage. What we know that Brexit was a result of Russia interference. At that time, we were not sure about that. But today we know that. And I think you have a result. We managed to secure a result for pro-EU while UK didn't.
Okay, I don't think we're going to talk about Brexit here. I think
I
we've
know,
all had enough of that topic for a lifetime. Yeah, okay. I want to come to the question from Zenia Polska, who's asking, how much does the result of the referendum reflect the dissatisfaction of citizens in the current level of corruption and deficits of the judiciary system in Moldova? Maybe, Ionela, would you like to address this?
Very briefly, when Maia Sandu was elected, and then when PAS was elected in the parliament and governing, the Moldovan population put all their expectations and very high expectations that all the problems in Moldova will be resolved in a very short period of time. Which I feel like these very high expectations, it's was a double-edged sword, because in a way, even though PAS and the government, they advanced with the reforms against corruption, they completed all the reforms asked by the European Commission, because we have to remember that European Commission, in order to grant the accession status and to start the negotiation process in Moldova, they asked Moldova to comply with 9 reform criteria, and one of the main sector was improving the fight against corruption and doing all the judiciary reforms that the European Commission believed necessary in order to start the process. Of those were completed, and we have the technical approval from Brussels that those were completed in a satisfactory manner in order to start the accession process. At the same time, obviously, a country who is still a candidate country to the European Union has many other challenges in the fight against corruption, because this is a very complicated area which cannot be solved in one electoral circle. So probably they will take them more years to solve this problem realistically. And I believe that this is also an issue that the regular citizens don't understand, that political leader cannot solve a problem overnight. There are processes that take many years, and for some of them you need more time in order to resolve them. And we have to keep in mind that all these reforms that they were asked by the European Union, from the moment that Moldova announced its intention to become part of the European Union to the moment when we started the accession process, so around 2 years, it was done at a very fast speed, which is remarkable. Of course, there are many more reforms that needs to be done, but we have to have trust in this European integration process, because all these reforms will be implemented. But in order for them to be implemented, we need to stay, and the Moldovians will need to stay on the European path. Otherwise, we'll have a reverse of the whole process, and all the work that happened in the past years, it's for nothing.
Thank you, Ionela. We just have a couple of minutes left, so I want to come back to this issue of lessons learned, because obviously it's not just for the EU, it's also for other countries. And we know that in just about a week's time, Georgia will also be having really crucial elections, parliamentary elections next weekend. I mean, we've seen yesterday already thousands and thousands and thousands of Georgians out on the streets in Tbilisi with EU flags. I think they're preparing actually for a very tough election day. What would be, I'll ask to both of you, what would be the messages that you would give now for those defending Georgia's democracy? I mean, what they should be doing and what they should be prepared for next weekend. Maybe you go first, Iulian, then Ionela.
I think the key lessons learned is that democracy must be defended, democracy must be protected, and every effort counts. And we see the people of Georgia so united around their future. We really hope that would reflect into political result of the elections and represent the result of these elections, represent the will of the people. And I think the biggest lessons learned that every vote counts. And again, whenever it's at stake, the future of your country, all the efforts are important. And most important, do not give up. Do not give up to the challenges. Become stronger. Be more united. And I think if we are, we much stronger together if we keep like that. Thank you.
For me, it will be very simple because I've been working on Georgia for 10 years. Georgia, it's European, and we are looking at what's happening in Georgia. We are supporting the pro-European path of Georgia, and as Iulian said, every vote counts. So I encourage everyone to go to express their democratic vote. And we have to also pay attention that we might see the Russian foreign interference and manipulation toolkit in play as well. We might see again this illegal financing of pro-Russian parties. We might see a lot of political tactics. We'll see probably a lot of vote buying or fraud that will happen. We can also see some Russian infiltration to curb, the pro-European mobilization. So every pro-European Georgian have to go to vote. No matter if they are in diaspora or if they are home, their vote matters, because at the end of the day, democracy is about everyone expressing their vote. And fingers crossed for Georgia.
Yeah, thank you, Ionela. Indeed, fingers crossed for Georgia, but also fingers crossed for Moldova for the next round, because, I mean, based on what we've heard today, the path to the next round is not going to be easy. We can expect the worst of the worst from Russia. Whenever you think the Russians can't go any lower, they somehow manage to. But at the same time, I think, Moldovans also need big congratulations here for actually now having EU accession embedded into their constitution. This is really important, and this is a major achievement. And the fact that they successfully did that shows how far Moldova has actually come in the last years in terms of the reforms they've done, the resilience that the country has actually built up, including following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, because we started by saying how difficult it's been for Moldova, and what Moldova has actually achieved since then in terms of pushing back and not allowing themselves to be crushed by the Russians is extremely admirable. So I think they are an example to other countries. They're an example to the EU. And as you rightly pointed out, Ionela, there's many more things that the EU can actually do to get creative and to help strengthen its toolbox to push back against Russia and other external actors, hybrid activities. So thank you both for coming. I wish you all the best, actually, Iulian, for the next round of the elections. I hope that it goes well and that Moldova's European path will be further consolidated. So thanks again, and to everybody, thanks for joining, and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.